Hello, dance people, and welcome to David's Dance Podcast. I'm your host, David Evans. We're doing a solo podcast this week. I know it's been a while. I'm really sorry to all the regular listeners on the podcast. Um, it's been about 6 months now of me putting out 30 episodes, and it's been a pretty crazy pace, which I now realize is a lot to do by myself, especially talking and seeing other dance institutions, dance writers, dance people putting out podcasts. They're usually putting out one a month, one a quarter. And so I realized that the rate that I would have been putting podcasts out is pretty crazy, really, when you consider that I also work a full-time job and do my dance stuff and everything else with family and all of that. So, um, yeah, it's been a little bit crazy, especially, and I took a break in particular because for the last month or so, I've been working again. So, one of the things I'm genuinely really excited about is just lockdowns have finally come to an end, and we've had enough easing of restrictions in the UK that auditions are happening again, work is happening again, mostly outdoor works. You know, for the past year, we've had auditions, but um, they'd post up an audition and then it would be canceled, or yeah. But this is the first time we really have viable work happening. In particular, so it's been a little bit crazy getting back into kind of auditioning season again. In particular, because I've been having a bit of difficulty. I can't go into too much detail, but struggling honestly with the audition process. I think one of the difficult things is most choreographers are freelancers, like, everybody else. And so they don't have an HR department. They don't have really clear hiring practices that are like industry approved, or they're not necessarily administrators. Sometimes they're doing that work themselves, and so you end up with kind of mistakes, or you end up with a process that isn't that clear. um, and so I think a lot of dancers get frustrated with the hiring process. For me, I'm particularly frustrated often with um, a lack of transparency, and that doesn't necessarily mean dishonesty, but sometimes it just means there's real lack of clarity, or understanding where the hiring is coming from. I think it would help a lot if companies kind of laid out what their hiring process is going to be and where they'll be hiring from, and all of these things, and just having better contact details and simple things like that. Just keeping the lines of communication open, and having it as, transparent and fair as possible. So we're back into that season. Also, I did about a week's work, which was really, really nice to do. And that was up in Manchester. So I got a call from Ella Mesma, and she was the movement director on a piece called The Walk, A Sleeping Child, for Cheryl Martin. So Cheryl Martin is a poet and theater director, and she's been directing this piece up in Manchester for the Manchester International Festival. And the piece is an hour-long outdoor family show. It is about the experience of a refugee girl who gets lost, and the experience of her loved ones looking for her. So it's really kind of focused on the refugee experience. It's a part of a bigger project called The Walk, and that features a a huge puppet that has been built, which is about 2 people high and requires 3 puppeteers to kind of work to animate to bring to life. And what they're doing is they're taking this huge puppet of a little refugee girl, and they are traveling with it, doing like a pilgrimage, so to speak, across Europe. So from Turkey through Europe, up into the UK, and eventually arriving in Manchester. And so this event was kind of helping to kick off that walk. And the idea of the walk is to have kind of pop up art events along the way to raise awareness of the refugee crisis. I think in particular, there's waves in the news cycle, and with everything happening with COVID-19, the kind of refugee crisis sort of got pushed to the side again and kind of became sort of old news. But all those refugees are there, and regardless of various policies of governments, these are people going through really difficult things and having to leave their homes and engage in these really difficult and often dangerous journeys. And so I got a call from Ella, and it was to be in the piece. And it was super. It was very quick turnaround, which was really why she wanted dancers she already knew. And it was quite smart choreography on her part, in that she sort of kind of clipped together some of the language, I would say, and phrases from other pieces, and kind of molded it, reworked it to work for this piece. And to be honest, by the time we got to the final piece, it was quite different from movement wise from other pieces we'd done with her. I mean, the language was very similar, but more of what I'm saying is that it became a piece unto itself. But I think having those reference points of work that we'd already done with her really helped us quickly go, okay, use sections from other works as almost like a template. So that was really helpful. And so a bit of a bizarre process where we had Zoom rehearsals, and we're learning some material from like video. And then we went up to Manchester, and we had 3 full days of rehearsal, 2 indoors, 1 outdoors at the venue. So we performed at the Castle Field Bowl, which is this huge outside outdoor concrete amphitheater by the canal, which they did it there so that it could be like socially distanced, and they set up pillows and things like that in like groups for families to sit at, which was super. And this was all still before things are really opened up, so they were very strict about COVID regulations, and like we had to take COVID tests every 48 hours, sorry. And it was very intense. But you know what, I think it was, just from an enjoyment point of view, it was honestly, it was one of the most enjoyable projects I've been on. I think the brevity helped. I think sometimes when you're going on longer projects, in particular, I'm thinking of dancers who are on contract and friends who I know are in companies, or take longer contracts. It's very easy to get burnout, or especially on tour. And I think having short projects, it is very intense, but then you have can sort of recover afterwards. And I did need time to recover. I needed almost like a week to recover. Mostly emotionally. I was really surprised that, due to the heavy nature of the emotional material in the piece, that actually emotionally took quite a lot out of me. Not in a bad way, but just in a way of, feeling like you've been through a lot, and that, You need that alone time, that to just kind of recharge. But it was definitely one of the most enjoyable pieces I've been in. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the atmosphere. We had, every day after rehearsals, long rehearsal days, 9 to 6. But every day after, I would go and hang out with dancers, like we'd go out for dinner or go to the park and eat there, and like hang out and do salsa or, kind of whatever. And it's those kind of times where you get to just hang out, because for me, like I just love other dancers. To me, like other dancers are just so much fun to hang out with. They're, just even just the dance bit aside, the fact that they're dancers tends to make them sort of just fun, kind of open to creative experiences, and like just kind of not necessarily sociable people, but people with a willingness to connect with others. Um, there's something at the center of dance which is about connecting with other people. So that really made it for me, just honestly getting to know um, some new dancers, and also just like hanging out with some old faces, some people I already knew. And so I think that made a huge difference. And I really am glad that I prepped really hard. I did prep really hard for this so that when I went there, I wasn't stressing so much about the piece and I could focus more on just enjoying myself and being present. Now, all of that said, I was teaching some material and I was more visible for some sections, because I knew the material better. But, um, I'm not saying that to like, oh, I knew it better. Those sections I knew better. I knew because I had sort of already done versions of them in previous works. Um, kind of, and looking back at the footage from the final performance that we did, without being too critical, I think I wish I had worried less about doing the choreography exactly right in order to anchor it, for the others, because there is a little bit of sometimes, especially when there's a fast turnaround in a piece where some some other dancers might follow you, or you might follow them if you're not as sure, or you're looking for cues from other dancers. So I think because I was aware that I was kind of anchoring the piece a little bit in that way, I think I didn't go for it as much as I could have. But that said, we only had one big performance. Hopefully we get to do it again. And if we get to do it again, I look forward to just really just going for it and letting loose. And changes like some adjustments with the costume and the staging, I think will help us to just go for it a bit more, because some of those were not really, like aspects of the stage and the floor and how we spaced it out, which we had to structure very quickly, because we actually didn't have that long, using the actually in the venue to really space it. I think fine tuning those things allows you to make sure you have enough space to really, and you're familiar enough with the space that you can really just gun it, and really commit to the movement without worrying, oh, am I, uh, in somebody else's window and covering them up, or is my foot going to slip because I'm on a raised platform and I need to watch my footing. So those kind of things. But yeah, honestly, I had a great time. It was so nice to perform again. And um i I often say to people that for me the favorite part is the process, but I actually really surprised myself how much I actually enjoyed the performance. I really enjoyed actually connecting with the crowd, and it was a family, so it was, especially becoming a parent this year, it was really nice to see all these little kids who were like dancing along and like engaged in the story. And there was like one point where like a little girl sort of like broke away from the crowd and like tried to join us on stage when we were like doing a dancing bit. Um, which meant that like a steward kind of came running out of the side and sort of like was like, okay, here we go. And like, swept her off. Um, yeah. So that was yeah. So it's been really full on with that. And the other thing that's kind of been going on or ticking away is, finally making some work again. So last time I made some work was I think last Christmas pretty much. I've been playing with like some animation ideas and turning animation into choreography, but lately I've been inspired by a very different theme, which is being inspired by all the bird life, all the songbirds in and around this area, Godalming, 10 minutes south of Guildford, where my wife and our son we've moved to. And as a New Zealander, so in New Zealand, right, there's there's hardly any mammals except for what was introduced by the Europeans. The only native mammals are the bats. And besides that, pretty much all the wildlife is birds and it's reptiles. And New Zealand has amazing, beautiful native birds and native bird life. And moving here to Godalming is the first time I've been in the UK where I've felt really, truly surrounded by nature and surrounded by birds and on it and such an abundance of songbirds. And there's so many more birds and types of birds that I've seen than when I've been anywhere else in the UK. And don't get me wrong, like as a tourist visiting other nature parts of the UK, you'll see birds and things, but this is the first time I've lived in a place where it's been like that all the time, just because of the abundance of woodlands here, which is really lovely. It also made me realize that there's like a threshold, really, from I don't know what you'd call it, like from a habitat point of view, where you do need a certain amount of uh, certain kinds of habitat in order to support different levels of wildlife, in different complexity of wildlife. So even though I've lived in places that were rural adjacent or had lots of parks with trees and things like that, it's not quite the same as living in an area that is heavily forested, adjacent to forest, adjacent to agriculture, adjacent to meadows, rivers, and all of these different like kind of mini habitats that can support really strongly support all this bird life. So I've been really inspired by that, and I wrote some music. I'm not very much of a musician, but I grew up playing guitar and piano. Um, so I wrote a melody based on different bird songs, and I sent them to a musician friend of mine, a folk musician, Ben Moss, who has been making them sound so much better than how I wrote them, which is the amazing thing having, such talented musician friends. And one of the interesting things about him is he is also a Morris dancer and a contemporary dancer. And so our hope is what I'm going to create is a sort of maybe 20, 30-minute work that is a kind of duet. So mostly I would be dancing and Ben would be playing the fiddle. We would be playing original music based around bird songs. And I've been playing with this movement, creating choreography that is based on different bird movements and bird behaviors. And so I've really enjoyed that. And it's been a bit of a funny theme. So when I was at Laban, um, I created a solo that was based on um, the character of a dragon and how would a dragon move. this sort of serpentine approach that was really based around kind of the spine and leading through the head and leading through the tailbone. And thinking really about the whole length of the body, how it can be this kind of rippling effect through the vertical axis. And so it's interesting playing with the idea of kind of animals again. I find animal movement really inspiring for pieces, and a great place to start. I think two of the things that really emerge, I've been thinking about my own choreographic practice over the years. And we've on this show, we've interviewed quite a few choreographers now. One of the things that surprises me and probably surprises you is just how different everyone's choreographic process is. And so it got me thinking, like, what characterizes my own process? And I'm sure it would be very different. I'd have to ask friends who have worked with me, people who've worked with me as dancers who have danced in my work, what they think of my process and how they would characterize it. But I think for myself, two things really come to mind. One, from just a strong starting point and process point of view, I am really an improviser at heart. I come from a background in salsa and breakdance, and I really started, and for most of my dance life have done styles that are improv based, that are freestyle based, where you don't do choreography, or if you might learn choreography, but you learn choreography as a means to an end of becoming a better freestyler, a better improviser. And so it's taken me a while as a dancer to become better at learning and doing choreography. I'm definitely naturally more an improviser and like to explore movement that way. And that comes with kind of just lateral thinking as well, and liking to explore. And I find most dancers are that way. Most dancers are kind of either slightly better at learning choreography or better at improvising. Some can do one but not the other. I know amazing dancers who can improvise and can't do a lick of choreography, and vice versa. Those who can do incredible choreography can pick it up so quickly and do it amazing, but then really struggle to let go in improvisation. And there are tools that you can learn. I think if you're very good at one, you definitely can learn the other. But anyway, as this applies to choreography, I find that the way I tend to choreograph is to start with an idea, a concept, whether that's a movement idea, a shape, a rhythm. In this case, it was like playing with the idea of flying or soaring, these different bird flight patterns. And what would that look like if I played with that flight pattern of soaring? If I moved around different body parts, if I did it with the hands, if I did it with my head, with my hips, shifting it around that way. And how I would do it is I would do an improvisation. I would just freestyle with and play with these ideas, figuring out what feels good, trying different things out. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, and I would just record it and then watch it back. And after watching it back, I would just pick out the ideas. I'm like, that looks good. I like how that looks. I like how that presents. And I don't like that. And a lot of it's not so much about being critical, but in those early stages, for me, it's about picking out ideas that I want to develop further. So looking for things where it's like, I love the way that, like, my hand moves there, or that thing where the motion shifts from my hands into my hips, like that transition. Maybe we play more with that. And so I kind of build from there and go deeper with some of the ideas and just improvise again, go for another 10 minutes, record it, go deeper with the ideas, look at it. And that's basically, for me, mostly how I build choreography. Um, I know there's some choreographers who like will write out steps. Um, like that is very, very hard for me to do. For me, I find that I just improvise it and I just do that improvisation again and again. And then as I do it more and more, I set, so I fix more of the movements each time. So it's almost like the choreography starts totally loose. I explore different things, and then different things start to get set in stone. Areas that I'm like, oh, I love that. That is an anchor point. I'm going to do that again. And so I do it again when I improvise, and then I do new bits around it. And so then I start to figure out, okay, maybe, that little phrase or bit I know about, I'll make that a beginning, then I'll move into that bit, which I already know about, and then I'll work towards the end and then the kind of end, whatever. And then how do I connect those ideas? And I'll improvise how I connect and transition between those different choreographic ideas, textures, movements, whatever. And so for me, it's kind of a process of starting with almost not chaos, but starting with exploration and then just things becoming slowly refined and going deeper and clearer and going, what's that texture? I love what the hands are doing, but, what are my feet doing? Should that be lower? Looking at the body as a whole. And so in that way, it's kind of a process of almost like, creative writing where uh where I just have to just do like a brain dump, just write, and then I can't go back and just like, oh, in some ways I am going back and editing, but really I'm just rewriting it and finding out what sticks, what are the themes that keep reemerging. So that's what I do. And just slowly the choreography starts to become more and more concrete. It is quite a sometimes laborious way of making choreography because I find that sometimes I'm doing a whole 10 minutes of improvisation and I only set about a minute of it. But that's kind of okay because that also, during that time, I'm not only learning the choreography, it's allowing me to be inside the piece as a performer so that by the time the choreography is set, the movement is set, I am already very well integrated as a performer into what the choreography feels like. And I find because it's coming from this place of improvisation, it's often quite organic. It feels well integrated with my own movement. There's nuances in there that are really hard to choreograph if you're choreographing steps instead of movement per se. Little subtle transitions that if you're like, do the step, would just be too hard to communicate or to even create. So I find that's also partly why a lot of my choreography looks quite organic and is usually pretty. I mean, some of the stuff might be challenging, but it's usually easy on the body and very flowy. Because it comes from improvisation. So it's designed to flow, and that's not to say that I don't challenge myself in it, but it comes from an organic place of my body and it comes from how my body moves. And, and so there's a kind of organic way of moving. And I kind of like that. I like work it's nice as a dancer or when other dancers are in my work, when you can dance work that feels nice to move in. The Cunningham style is amazing. But sometimes styles like that, so like Cunningham had like his chance dances where decisions in the choreography were based on like the roll of a dice, and I did kind of a similar approach, I guess, in the previous piece I did, where I used animation and so I animated choreography on these 3D puppets in the computer first, and then I transitioned that to the human body. And so that really challenged me because it had a really inorganic way of moving. And then it's like, how do we transition that onto the body? And sometimes those things look freaking awesome, but they can be sort of disjointed to dance. But as challenges, they can be good because they can help us find new ways of moving. Ways of moving that are kind of unexpected. So, yeah, so that's kind of how this piece seems to be developing. I just wanted to touch on a little bit of my own process. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back into that a little bit more and keep collaborating with Ben and kind of pushing that really. I hope to do it as an outdoor performance, do it in a meadow somewhere as a pop-up performance, like where we just tell people where it's going to be. There's no big lights, there's no announcement. We just show up, we do it. It's bring your own chairs. It just happens. People watch it happen, and then we just, and then we just disappear. And I just love that idea of being a part of something like that. These kind of pop-up art events where, you're watching, you're in nature. I am going to invite people to see the piece. But I'm also excited for like just dog walkers, for just, passerbys who might pass and, see me dancing and see Ben playing the fiddle and producing this incredible music. I'm finding more and more that sometimes we don't need to overcook things, and it's enough just to present art. Just make beautiful art that expresses something, put it out there. Because to just do anything creative and bold and honest in a public space just really impacts people, because sometimes the day-to-day can be a little boring. And when people see people doing kind of courageous things and making art and doing things that they love and that they're passionate about in public spaces, that just makes them excited about living in that place and being there, and just excited about being alive. I think it's cool when you see people do things that they're passionate about in a skillful way, in a public space, because that's a space you occupy too. It's a space that you share, and so it becomes a moment that you share. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to update you guys on all that stuff. I am gonna do a few more reviews. I've been watching some more work that I want to do some reaction videos to, and hopefully we'll have Benny, my friend Benedicta, on the podcast very soon. And I'm gonna send out another round of call outs for new guests to be on. So I do want to give you a heads up that I probably won't be going at the same pace as I was before, putting out one every week. So things might be a little bit more in seasons, but I will continue the podcast and probably do a bit more of a mixture of solo and guest. So it won't be as intense, but there will be great, fantastic content coming your way. So if you like what you heard, click like and subscribe to hear more, and we'll see you next week. Ciao.